Cindy,
Hi.
welcome to Vrais Héros Partnerships with Purpose podcast series. It's so great to have you. I've been
Thank you.
looking forward to this conversation for some time now, and I got to tell you, you've got such an incredible family story to share with us, and we're so very lucky to have you on this call so that we get to learn a bit more about you. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
it's it's really our pleasure. I mean, you've made the time. You've got a really busy life running your family business, your family restaurant that's been in your family now for multiple generations. I think the last time we spoke, if my memory is working well, it's been in your family for 44 years. Your family's had a business in Montreal, that restaurant, and you've
Yes.
served the Montreal community for almost half a century. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
I know.
And I can only imagine what it's like for a powerhouse mom like yourself. I mean, you've got a family, a growing family. You've got two kiddos, plus you're running this business. Plus, I'm sure you're involved in the community, and you've got to support your friends and I'm sure of course your family members. So I can't wait to understand what life
Mhm.
is like for you as you hold up the world for so many people in your life. You laugh because it's true. Where do you want to get started? I'll leave it open to you. Where do you want to get started? Talking to us about this incredible life that you're leading. Where would you like to get started?
Oh, well, I don't know where to start. I was born into this generation where my grandparents and my parents were survivors, right? So from Vietnam, from both people, Vietnam coming to this country after leaving their country with everything that was going on back then during the war and everything, starting from scratch in the 70s. Um, it was a question of survival. So I was raised in a house where everybody had to work and to do their part to be able to live, to be able to have food on the table, to have shelter. And I remember episodes where my parents and my grandparents they worked so hard for so many days. We hardly had time to see them, but we always had food and always had enough food for everybody because that was my grandmother's thing. She just hustled her whole life just for us, just for us to have everything that we needed and nothing that's missing. Because from the war that when she went through and with my parents, the little children, it was important for her that we grew up with everything. So yeah, I just was raised
Yeah,
in that
yeah, go
environment.
ahead.
So I'm just
Yeah, your
carrying,
grandma.
yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, up to you, please. Yeah, you're just carrying.
No,
I
so
didn't want to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I'm just carrying through her legacy, right? So like when you asked the question about how am I, well, I'm just continuing her work. I was raised in it,
Wow.
so yeah.
When I hear you talk about your grandmother, what I hear is somehow because of the way you were raised to preserve family at the core, to make sure that there was food on the table, um, there was still a level of closeness that was there. And with your grandmother, it sounds like you were able um, to receive, and she was able to impart on you some very strong family values. And I can hear that when you talk about her. There's this tenderness in your voice when you talk about your grandma. You hold her up in such high regard. Can you tell me one of and this is going to be probably a really fun way to approach the conversation. Your grandmother not only sounds like someone that she had some strong family values, but she was very strong in some ways where she might have been quite similar to my own grandmother, and these are stories my own mom has told me about my grandmother. Um, my mom said to me that my grandmother, she ruled with an iron fist and a velvet glove. She was always
Mhm,
fair, she was always kind, but she was firm. And she had
mhm,
7 children, my grandmother,
mhm, mhm.
to raise, and you can imagine what that's like. I have one, you have two, and we have we struggle with our one and two. Could you imagine 7? Tell me something else, Cindy. Tell me something else about your grandmother that you
Oh
want
my
to
God,
honor.
my grandmother.
Tell me something very
Where
special about her.
where do I begin? My grandmother, I lost her. We lost her not too long ago, right? She was 91. We lost her on the 24th of December 2019. So it's really, really not too long ago. It was before this pandemic. And my grandmother was my God. She's still
Wow.
my God, and she's my inspiration. I look up to her. I look up to everything that she's done. More and more that I grow up, I I feel everything that she went through, her whole life, every segment, because you grow up hearing stories from your aunts and uncles and your parents or your grandmother, and you can't really put together the pieces of what she went through. But more and more that I grow up and I have a family of my own, um, I see and I feel what she may have gone through. And wow, the strength and the endurance that she had to go through to raise all her 6 children. And the seventh one died in Vietnam during the war. So she had 7 children and a couple of miscarriages. Um,
Yeah.
as a woman, as a leader of the family, I am not even at her ankle of what I could do. So I have a long way to go to of learning and of but she's an inspiration to me. She's everything. I look up to every single thing that she's done in her life and everything she's given. She is completely selfless. Like everything she's done for her children, for her family, and done very, very little for herself. Everything is just for everybody else. And she has gave us a really great legacy. This building where I'm living in right now, she built it with her own 2 hands, with her sweat, with her tears. She
Oh
has
my
bought,
gosh.
yeah, she has bought my family, every single one of them, her children, she has bought them houses to live in the 30 years she built her legacy, because she only retired in her 80s, right? When she was 80 years old, about, she started to retire and to really step back a little bit and let the children take over. But still, even then, she still took care of, her kids. But during that time where she was in Canada, and uh, she gave back a lot. Like, she gave to her kids, but she gave back a lot to even community and temples, and of her time and the food donations and everything. So I hope I could one day be like her. But she's my everything.
It's yeah. It I can't help but actually feel deeply what you're saying about your grandmother. When you talk about her, I see my own grandmother in the way you speak of your own, and you talk about selflessness, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a characteristic that I admire highly in my own mom. She gives to everybody else to lift them up, and she learned that from her mom, my own grandmother. And so when I hear you talk about giving to the community, your grandmother giving not only to the family, caring for the family, but also finding a way to give back to the community and lift them up and feed the community, I see
Mhm.
that in you because that's how you and I became friends. That's how we connected because
Yeah.
you you were you were inspired in some way by our Vrais Héros program,
Mhm.
and even before you and I connected, you were already
Mhm.
helping nurses with your grandma's legacy and your family
Yeah.
business by feeding the nurses who
Mhm.
were struggling through this COVID-19 pandemic and fighting COVID-19 to keep us all safe. You were already feeding them at hospitals without anyone asking you. You
Mhm.
asked someone that you knew, if I remember the story
Mhm.
correctly, how you
If
can
I could
help, and
help.
then you
Yeah.
right, and you started to
Mhm.
help without anyone asking for your help. You just volunteered to do it,
Mhm.
and so it sounds to me like that's one of those values, and that's what I wanted to ask you about. It sounds like that selfless giving, that community support, community giving, is one of those
Mhm.
values that you learned from your grandmother. Is that did
Yeah,
I?
my grandmother. Yeah, my grandmother. And it started in my early days. And I have a really, really marking memory of my grandmother when we used to go shopping because back then the restaurant is on Prince Arthur and on Saint Laurent. The way that back then we used to go shopping was that you had your little it's a little bag on wheels, kind of. I don't know how you call them, those strollers or bag on wheels. And she would carry those bag on wheels
the
and
shopping
she
carts?
yeah, those
Yeah,
shopping carts,
yeah,
and she would take me with
yeah.
her and we would walk on Saint Laurent Street and we would get all the groceries that we needed, right? So all the vegetables and all the food supply, the food for the restaurant. And she would carry all the time this small little pouch of money, and she would always hold it in her hands, in one hand. The other one she would tell to me to grab one other cart of the cart, and she would pull the cart. And every time that she would see a homeless person wanting, like needing money, she would reach into her little handbag full of change and she would give
Mm.
them. And that was, it was every single time, and on the way up and on the way down. And I remember asking my grandmother, grandmother, what are you giving them? Like, why do you need to give them? And she would turn around and she would say, I'm helping them because you never know their story. And she would keep telling me that I'm helping them because we don't know what his story is and he's struggling and he needs help. So I'm helping him. And that was one of the earliest memories I've got of my grandmother um, giving back to community and giving, helping the community in every way she can, you know. And we didn't have much money back then, but it was just her way of giving back. And all the time, like even if we had foods or from the restaurant, every time that there was a person in need that would come in. There was one time she gave a whole bag of rice to this homeless person and said, "Oh, I need to feed my family." And she just brought out a bag of rice and she's like, "Here, take this back to your family. Maybe you'll need it." Yeah, it was really, really early on. So all these things are in my memory. They're kind of things that I see and yeah. So I'm just remembering her every time and also helping the community, which is
And
very
when
important to me.
and helping the communities where we keep that memory of your grandma alive too, because like you use this word legacy.
Hmm.
It's partly you seeing her hand at work in your life, still being alive
Hmm.
today through these acts of kindness, through this way
Hmm.
you choose to give back to the community.
Hmm.
And while she is gone
Hmm.
physically, her presence, her values live on in you, and
Yeah.
you actually are part of her legacy. Like you remain, you endure through you, her values live on, and that's something I would look at and I would choose to celebrate. That's the way I look at it too. Would love to have had the chance to meet your grandma and spend some time with her. I love speaking to folks that have life experience and wisdom to share because man, the jewels of
Hmm.
learning, the jewels of wisdom,
Hmm.
the the humility that it creates in me to learn from someone who's seen so much life. is I feel good about creating a place of honor for people that have
Mhm,
lived a life and have earned that place of honor in our lives. So
mhm,
I get where you're coming from. You talked about giving as you're walking with your grandma in that story along the street on Saint Laurent, and her giving to people. I feel I want to share the story with you about my own son Elijah, who's 10 years old. At an early age, I started to teach him about money, and you know what I do for my career, so it's 25 years ingrained in my own DNA, my own blood. So I gave him three jars, and the three jars I put labels on them. The labels were give, save, spend. And what I used to do with him on a Saturday morning, I used to spend time with him where it was just him and I. We used to go take a walk in Toronto on Queen Street in the morning time when it was very quiet. No one was up yet because it's Saturday morning. Most folks are still resting from partying the night before. And I used to take him down on Queen Street, and I brought the give jar with us, and that's how I taught him to give back to folks that are less fortunate because um, opening up the jar, he would take out a loonie or a toonie, and he would ask me, "Is this what you want me to give to that person that's sitting there on the sidewalk?" And I would say to him, "If you're comfortable doing that, yes."
mhm,
So as a baby, he's maybe 5 or 6 years old. Like he went there with some trepidation, like because he felt like he didn't know the person. So it was my role to be sure that he felt safe and protected, and I encouraged him to let him know that I would be standing right next to him. And the first thing to do would be to ask the person, "Is it okay if I give you a gift?" Um,
mhm,
and of course, the person responded. And as a kid, as a baby, and he'll always be my baby, but with his little outstretched hand with the toonie, he extended his hand, dropped the toonie in the person's hands, and pulled his hand back really quickly
mhm,
because he didn't know. Like this is new to him,
mhm,
right? And so I got him to learn about giving in that way, and that experience opened up a world of dialogue. I mean, we went to get fries to eat for lunch, and then eating fries, he asked me, "Well, Dad, if we gave them money, should we give them food too?" And then I
mhm,
said to myself internally, "It's starting to work. Like he's starting to
mhm,
understand what acts of generosity are
mhm,
and how he can give back to our community." So
mhm,
when you share your story about your grandma, I can relate.
mhm.
I
Yeah,
completely get it. I get that.
yeah.
When we talk about this and we talk about your grandma, I wanted to ask about those values. The values of giving and selflessness. They seem to connect you to the Vrais Héros program. How did you come to learn about Vrais Héros?